Welcome one and welcome all. It is Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. It is 8:01 p.m. Central Standard Time. One of us made us late. I will name who. It was Tony Catalina. We are live on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel, the Blog on the Boys Twitch channel. If you are not here live, you can always catch this episode, the Blog on the Boys Roundtable, that is at your own convenience. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. You can also listen to the show at your own convenience. If you're an audio person only, on the Blog on the Boys podcast network, subscribe there as well. Leave a rating, write a review. If you do, you will hear these voices all throughout the week. All three gentlemen here tonight. Actually, you can hear in the earlier parts of the week. My name is RJ Ochoa, and we'll go in clockwise order. This is always the order of arrival. So Brandon Clements, the icebreaker himself, you are in our pole position tonight. How are you feeling, icebreaker?
I'm doing good. I guess I broke the ice by getting here first. It's usually, we were saying before the show, I'm usually the one that gets here just before the bell rings. So usually I'm in Tony Catalina's position, but it looks like we kind of switched roles this week. And then, Howman kind of slid in second. So, I'm feeling okay. It was a bye week for not only the Dallas Cowboys, but my Syracuse Orange. So getting ready for a nice week of football. So Thursday for me is Syracuse football. And then obviously the game against the Rams this coming weekend.
Did not know you like Syracuse. First time hearing of this. I hear their basketball team sucks, but we can talk about that in March. David Howman, you are here with a visual assault. Look, I just want to be honest, Howman, sports are dumb. Like, there's no reason for us to put any of our hopes or wants or wishes behind sports. They really don't matter. The consequences, the results. Baseball is great, but I mean, is it really the whole world? Honestly, no.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't have put it better myself, and that's really the approach I've taken with the Rangers all year. After they got off to a hot start, I was like, they're going to find a way to blow it, and then they kind of did with how they blew the division. But now they're in the World Series. Now it's time for me to get my hopes up and be a little bit distracted from the Cowboys, only for them to, I'm sure, inevitably blow it in the World Series, just like they did the last time they were there, which was also the last time I really bragged about being a Rangers fan.
That made me feel a little bit better, actually. So thanks, Howman. I really do appreciate that. Tony Catalina, I am salty, as Ajit notes in the comment section. Tony, has a sports team that you root for ever won a title in your lifetime? Like one of the ones you assign your primary emotions to? I guess the Red Sox would be the only one. I don't know why that went over my head before.
I mean the Red Sox, but I mean I was alive when the Cowboys had won. I mean I was a young kid. Nothing like I have a whole plan mapped out when the Cowboys won the Super Bowl, and the things that I want to do now, I couldn't do 28 years ago. So if you get my drift,
I guess that's the question I'm sort of asking, Tony. Like, you haven't been 21 when your team won a title. That's a different kind of, ballpark. No pun intended.
Yeah, 2018, I went to the Red Sox World Series parade, and that was a blur. That was a good time.
Well, good for you. Howman, you picked up 5 points for that sweet backdrop. I will say I'm very grateful that this is at least over. This was a very awkward week and a half for me, but thankfully it is now in the rear view mirror. Michael has wished me a happy belated birthday. The Astros did win on my birthday, so at least I had that day before everything fell apart, but it kind of is what it is. So Howman's off to a 5-point lead. In case you're new around here, the Roundtable is a competition. Points will be awarded throughout the night, both from me and from the crowd. So make sure to comment who you want to give points to. Tony, you haven't been here in a while. And so do you feel like that discredits the roundtables that have been won? Are there asterisks that you would assign?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some, they weren't playing with the A game here. And to be completely honestly, to get the, a peek behind the curtain. The only reason why I hadn't been on here is people have just been quicker than me to sign up. So, the fact that I haven't been here means there's a lot of eager people that wanted to be on there. So it's a good thing.
I thought you weren't here a few weeks ago because it was your wife's birthday. I paid attention to birthdays too. So happy belated birthday to Rachel from all of us at Blog on the Boys. Hopefully Tony, not even hopefully, I know Tony delivered on the gift. Right, Howman? Tony wouldn't not deliver on a birthday gift for the wife.
Yeah, it had to be like one of the top tier gifts, and like probably right on the top of the list of best gift ideas out there.
She's easy. She's easy.
It sounds like it was a success. All right, let's get to tonight's topic. Let's see here. By the way, Kevin notes that Tony is saying everyone has been scared. So Howman, Brandon, if you win tonight, it is real. It is authentic, I think, is what Tony is saying as he takes a sip of, I'm going to guess, Coke Zero. Is that what that is, Tony?
You're right.
Me. That's a talent that I have, guys. All right, just so you know, to be able to identify carbonated beverages from afar. Brandon, let's start with you. You are in the first spot. General kind of template here tonight. You mentioned it, the Cowboys coming out of their bye. They return on Sunday afternoon, a nice noon central kickoff. Everybody gets to go to bed early on Sunday. They're 4-2, but kind of a weak 4-2, a 4-2 that we weren't super proud of this time a week ago, coming off of Monday Night Football. So that being said, we'll go around the horn here. Brandon, what do you want to see from the Cowboys coming out of the bye? It can be anything you want, anything under the sun.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things on my list, but I think the first thing that I thought of when the Rams were the Rams matchup was coming up here, it's the makeshift running back room of the LA Rams right now with Kyron Williams. He's on IR. So right now you had a Darrell Henderson. He wasn't even, like, for fantasy football purposes, he wasn't fantasy relevant until this past week. And then you also have Royce Freeman. You have, I believe it's Zach Evans as well. I think he was a day 3 pick, which clearly they don't trust him because they brought 2 guys off the street essentially to start on the roster. So for me, the Cowboys defense, this will be a good thing for them. It'll be a kind of hopefully a catalyst for the run defense, because the run defense has been not that great this season. So if the Cowboys cannot dominate against the run, against this makeshift running back room, that's going to be very concerning for me. So I think this should be a catalyst this weekend for the defense to get on track, be more consistent against the run, and then hopefully stay consistent the rest of the year.
So your primary want has nothing to do with the offense. I think that's where everybody's going to go. You're more focused on the run defense. That's your number one qualm right now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of many. I mean, there's a multitude of different options. Actually, my first 2 were actually defensive, just to kind of peek behind the curtain here. But yeah, I mean, there's multiple things I'd like to see. But for me, I want them to stop the run a lot better. It starts for me up front on defense, and I think if they can kind of fire on all cylinders and light up the LA Rams defense, it'll give them hopefully some good confidence going forward against the Eagles matchup after that.
We'll keep the curtain closed. You offered a peek, but this is a competition. All right. We, rooting for everybody independently and equally. So, make sure you hold all the cards close to the vest. Howman, Kevin says, I would love us to figure out how to run the ball effectively because Pollard isn't getting it done in the run game. So the kind of exact opposite in some ways of what Brandon said. Is that where you were going to go? Your number one wish if the genie showed up and asked what you wanted from the Cowboys?
Yeah, that's definitely my number one wish, is getting the run game going on offense. There's definitely, if you have a whole list somewhere on there, the run defense is on there, but I think at the top of the list has to be the run game. The Cowboys have just been like comically bad at running the ball the last couple of weeks, and it's been it's been everything that has contributed to it. Like, some of it is the scheme; they're just not running it effectively. Some of it is the offensive linemen are just getting blown off the line. Some of it is Tony Pollard is not playing as explosive as he has in the past. Some of that might be that he's still adjusting to being the number one, the workhorse. Some of it also surely is just still a little bit of rust coming off that injury. But in general, they have not run the ball well. I think they're 25th in rushing DVOA. They're 15th in EPA per carry. Right now, one thing that I like about the offense is that they're throwing it on early downs at a pretty high rate. They're 11th in that number, but looking at early down EPA per play, they're 11th on early down passes. When they run the ball on first and second down, they're dead last in EPA per rush. So when they run the ball early, it's just a train wreck. When they run the ball pretty much anywhere, it's not been good. And I think Dak Prescott has been kind of up and down, but he overall has been positive this year. But you got to have a run game that's not going to be a liability if this offense is going to be a successful unit that can carry them. And that's going into the bye. That's perfect time to figure out this issue. That's, to me, the number one issue.
Tony, we'll come to your number one want in just a moment, but I want to start with you on this question, because the idea of Tony Pollard not living up to, if you want to call it expectation, has been tossed around. Kevin just gave Howman 5 points for this particular subject. So true or false? We'll go around. Like I said, Tony Pollard has been the most disappointing player on offense so far this season. If your answer is false, I would like you to give us who has been the most disappointing player. And this can be relative to expectation. So you can say, look, I expected this dude to be, Super Saiyan freak God mode, and he isn't. So that's the most disappointing thing in my mind. But we are talking offensive side of the ball exclusively. Tony Catalina.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's false. And for me, it's because it's a guy who's been getting a lot of heat. I tried to defend him a little bit, but the confidence around him is waning a little bit for me. And it's Michael Gallup, right? I think if you look at what he's asked to do in a nutshell, I don't think anybody expected like 1,000 yards receiving or this big, massive impact. But what we had heard coming into camp was, the mental side of it is done. I'm physically better. Like everything seems to be clicking into him having a bigger impact. And, for, the first start of the season, I was like, oh my God, it doesn't look good. And then it was like, okay, here he is against Arizona and it looked better against the Patriots. And then, you look at it against the Chargers and you're like, oh man, like he's caught like one ball on like 9 targets. Then you start wondering, Dak's throwing the ball to him too much and it's just not working. And so for me, it's, Tony Pollard hasn't been exactly what we needed from him, but for me, relative to expectation, it's got to be Michael Gallup.
Okay, Brandon, Tony Pollard, Michael Gallup, are either of those your answers for most disappointing player on offense so far?
Yeah, Tony Pollard to me is the most disappointing. I think for a guy who, we were all expecting to be the lead back, the guy who's supposed to be explosive in the running game. He hasn't been explosive in the running game. He's averaging 3.9 yards a carry. I mean, this running attack is ranked yards per average actually at 3.9 per carry at 21st out of 32 teams. So for me, like it just kind of, for the $10 million that we signed him for on that franchise tag, I don't think we're getting a good return on investment. He's doing what I expected him to do out of the pass game, because if you look at the stats, he is one of our better receivers, reception wise and yardage wise. So, from that perspective, that's been Tony Pollard. He's a receiver in college. He played receiver and running back at Memphis. So that's kind of his MO. That's kind of his game. And, this to me, I feel like he's not a true lead back. That's just where I'm at with him. I think he's a heck of a player. I think he's super talented, but I think the Cowboys paying him $10 million for this type of production so far, I don't think the return on the investment has been, expected. And, being $10 million, that puts him in the top tier of salaries for running backs in the league on an average salary basis. So for me to put up 3.9 yards per carry and just, to me, I think part of it is the injury as well. I don't think has been as explosive as he was prior to the injury. So that could play a factor in that situation with Pollard. But for me, that's the big issue. I feel like the Cowboys are missing an element with this running game, and especially, which I'm sure there's going to be a few people talking about the red zone situation coming up here tonight. And I think a guy like Tony Pollard, he's good between the 20s. So like he's good. He's good on that part of the field. But once you get in the red zone, it could be a combination of Tony Pollard. Just, I don't think he's a ground and pound type running back. I think he's more of elusive. He get him in space and let him go kind of a back, which by design, Mike McCarthy could design plays a little bit better for him, I feel like, and use his skill set a little bit better instead of just jamming it right up the middle every time. I think that's not really his game. So I think it's a combination of things. And with Tony Pollard, I just feel like we're missing that. We have the lightning, because Tony Pollard, although he's not as elusive, as electric as he has been, he's still the lightning on this team. I think we're missing an element of the thunder, which is why, a lot of our colleagues at Blogging the Boys, have mentioned some names like James Conner and, the big one, Derrick Henry, but I'm not going down that rabbit hole. But, to that point, I can see why some folks, around Cowboys Nation are wanting that or clamoring for it, because they need it. They need that power back. And Tony Pollard, just, to me, as a whole, hasn't lived up to the expectations.
So no negative points tonight. I'm not going to assign them. I'm fine if people want to give them out. But Tony, Kevin did take 5 away from you, so I've spared you for noting Tony Pollard's franchise tag money that he's getting paid. And so Kevin did then give 5 points to Brandon for saying that people didn't want to eat crow on Tony Pollard not being a lead back. You did raise your hand before Howman gets to go, Tony.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of revisionist history. It's not Brandon. I see it, some of the comments and the way people are talking about Tony Pollard. Like, the Cowboys had an option of Ezekiel Elliott wasn't going to be around for the number that he was there, or, have nobody back, right? So I think the Tony Pollard franchise tag is a placeholder. I don't think there's any much long-term future there. I think they had minimal conversations about him being the back of the future. Like, this was just the cost of doing business with losing Zeke off the books, and literally guys like Rico Dowell, Malik Davis, Deuce Vaughn, like they could swing it at the position because the allocated resources there wasn't as high. So I think people see the number, get hung up on the number, and expect him to be like Christian McCaffrey or some all-world talent. Like, he's coming off an injury. He's going to be productive. He does. I mean, he was, a slightly better thrown ball away from making a massive impact on Sunday night or Monday night.
Wow, so Dak sucks now. Interesting.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, don't get that going. But so honestly, I think, yeah, relative to money, it hasn't been great, but people are acting like this is some long-term investment. There's a real chance that Tony Pollard will not be here next year, and I think people forgot that.
Howman Casey says false. Steele or Michael Gallup are more disappointing. So that was kind of Tony's answer. So the time has come, I guess, to kind of break the tie. If you're going to lean one way or the other, maybe you are going to go Terrence Steele, and then we'd have a 3-way tie.
I'm actually going to go a different direction, but not with Terrence Steele, although I did consider him. I think for me, the biggest disappointment relative to the expectations has been Brandon Cooks, because this was someone that, like, when he was traded, we were all saying, like, this is exactly what they need. He's the savvy veteran. He catches everything. All he does is get 1,000 yards with like every single team he's ever played for. And he's that deep threat. He's going to take the top off of a defense. And he's come in and, like, you can blame some of it on the offense, and they haven't taken a whole lot of deep shots. But even when they have, it hasn't really worked out. And I mean, the 49ers were still able to just sit on all those underneath throws, and they were able to pick off passes because there was no deep threat. Brandon Cooks didn't change that. And I mean, you can debate how much of that is necessarily on him versus the scheme. But again, relative to the expectations, like, he was, when they traded for him, he was supposed to be the guy that fixed their biggest problem on offense last year. And it hasn't happened yet. And I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. I'm not saying, like, I'm over Brandon Cooks. I'm still holding out hope, and he's definitely had some good plays, but it hasn't been what we thought we were getting when the trade happened. So, like, Michael Gallup has had some rough games, but I mean, I really didn't have, huge expectations for him coming into this. He kind of entered as, like, the wide receiver 3. I think for that, he's more or less played up to a wide receiver 3 level. And then with Tony Pollard, like what Tony was saying, as far as the money goes, you're really not spending any more on the running back position than you were last year. And again, they're not committed long-term to him. So if they get to the end of the year and Pollard hasn't really improved that much, they're not in a tight spot. Like, they can move on with the running back position and go a different direction. So I'm not really, like, so hung up on the money, although he has been playing poorly and you want to see better. But I think just relative to what I was hoping for, Brandon Cooks is the one that has the largest gap between the expectations and what he's put up so far.
That was a really well thought out answer. Now, I think all of your answers, it wouldn't be fair to just pin it on Michael Gallup or Tony Pollard or Brandon Cooks. There are obviously a lot of variables and factors involved. So to that point, Kevin offers on Brandon Cooks. Sorry, that was AJ taking 2 points away from Howman. Remember, no negative points tonight. Good vibes, positive vibes only. But Kevin says Cooks' lack of production is more of an indictment on McCarthy's offense. Why add a guy like Cooks if you're never going to take a deep shot? By the way, I'm just waiting for the regular season to end and to fire off the tweet about how Brandon Cooks had 1,000 yards like 9 years in a row and then showed up to the Cowboys and didn't do it. So that will be really funny and really depressing, but still it will do numbers. And that's really, why we all lift all them weights. By the way, Andrew wants to know about my shirt. I bought this shirt from Homage, our good friends. So it's a good one. This is the best sitcom of all time, even though Seinfeld's pretty good. So we're doing something here tonight that is a little bit different. I didn't tell any of you about this because like a different show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Sometimes we make up the rules as we go along. So I'm going to hand out winners to each round, and there will be bonus points associated with them. They may not all be the same. So the winner of this round was Howman. So Howman, you got 10 bonus points. I should say points, not point. That's my bad there. But again, the points do not matter ultimately. But congratulations to you. Tony, I think you had the worst answer. I think it was a good case, but I don't know that anybody had legitimate expectations of Michael Gallup. Again, I think that it's fair to be disappointed at him, but like, was anybody really like counting on him? We were really counting on Brandon Cooks to a great degree.
Well, the conversation is like the expectation was that he was going to be a solid to good wide receiver 3 who got over the hurdle. Now we see people talking about Jalen Tolbert who are hyped up over, a couple of training camp passes and some, preseason work. And
now Tolbert sucks. Jeez, Tony.
But it's just like the narrative switched to like, Gallup is going to evolve to no, now we need Tolbert and cut out Gallup. And it's just like, yeah, I even alluded to the fact that like the expectations were tempered, but like to that tempered expectation, he's definitely not hit the mark there, even at that point.
I think Gallup's target numbers against the Chargers did him no favors with the fan base, and that's not at all Michael Gallup's fault. But you know, he's just kind of the like direction that people can point their anger. He's sort of the like manifestation of people's frustration with Mike McCarthy. Again, not fair. But Howman, congratulations to you. A total of our points so far. Howman's out to a 25-point lead. He has lapped you to Tony and Brandon. He has more than double your amount of points. How does that make you feel, Brandon?
It's okay. It's a fair point. Howman made a good point. I still like my point better, but it's okay.
The word we were looking for was embarrassed in terms of how it made you feel. So that just to be very clear. Tony, this means that you have to answer the original question. What do you want to see from the Cowboys coming out of the bye?
Yeah, so I'm glad we were talking about Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup, because the very first bullet point I put was generally just more involvement from other pass catchers, whether it be Jake Ferguson, Brandon Cooks. Like, we know what CeeDee Lamb can do. We know he's capable of 7 catches, 117 yards. He's a guy that they should be manufacturing touches for, but like there just hasn't been enough from everybody else. Like, you know, Howman made a good point, and we had talked about, you know, the 49ers only touchdown was Kevontae Turpin. We need more of that, right? Where are these other guys that can step up? I do want to see more Jalen Tolbert. I want to see more productive work from Michael Gallup. I don't need him leading targets and only catching one of them, but where is everybody else? You know, Schoonmaker dropped one over the middle, you know, for a touchdown, and it's like he was forgotten about. You know, Jake Ferguson, who I've been a leader of the band club, you know, the fan club there, and he just really has kind of been MIA a little bit.
Me too.
Tony, now Brandon's coming for your corner.
You
have
can
to
have
share.
it. Did he play in Syracuse?
No, he did not play in Syracuse. But come on, I've been a big fan of Jake Ferguson. I've been calling him the number 1 tight end all offseason. So I'm on that with you.
Who was challenging for the number 1 tight end throne? Like again, I don't take anything from Jake Ferguson, but I mean, there wasn't a lot of competition.
No, yeah. So
valid.
Overall, you know, I just think that there has to be more pass catchers. And I think part of that is Mike McCarthy and the play calling. They need to stretch the field a little bit more. They need to, you know, be able to kind of use Brandon Cooks for what they brought him here for. Like 4 catches for 48 yards and a touchdown shouldn't be like Brandon Cooks has arrived. You know what I mean? That should be like the floor. So I just overall, it needs to be better work in the passing game.
Tony, I wanted to get your comment or your thoughts on a comment that we got at the beginning of the stream. This is a quick deviation, but Casey said, "Why was Tony so late? Was he at a Matt Patricia lookalike contest?" Have you ever heard this before?
I have, and I've actually met Matt Patricia, and somebody alluded to it. So yeah.
Do you see it yourself?
I mean, I could see the beard, but like, I mean, that's about it. I don't have a pencil in my ear, but
you got to get the pencil now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
maybe Halloween.
Fun fact about Matt Patricia: he's actually a Central New Yorker. Just putting it out there.
Oh, I thought for sure you were going to say you went to see it.
Brandon, you can't just like lay claim to Central New York. Like that's way too big of an area. Like that would be like fun fact about Matt Patricia: he's an American. I mean, you know what I mean? Like let's just
RJ's 400 miles from Austin, so you know.
Yeah, we're gonna let you have Syracuse, but you know, let's just let's calm down a little bit. Okay, yeah, I agree with you, Tony. I don't know that Jake Ferguson has been disappointing in terms of performance, but all these issues kind of point at Mike McCarthy, which is the elephant in the room. The Texas Coast, West Coast. I hate saying the name Texas Coast. It feels like such a lame joke, but everything about the offense has been really piss poor. And so, like all of you, well, not all of you, Brandon, your first focus was defense, but I really feel like if the Cowboys don't show up offensively on Sunday against the Rams, Howman, that there is going to be a bit of panic starting to set in, especially with a matchup in Philadelphia looming next week.
I mean, yeah, but there's always something to panic about when you're a Cowboys fan. Like there's always a reason to be like, oh my God, the sky is falling. So, I mean, some of that you just kind of chalk up to that's just the way the world goes in Cowboys land. But I mean, it can't be overstated though that the Rams do have a good defense. They still have a guy named Aaron Donald. Raheem Morris, their defensive coordinator, he's been doing a pretty good job this year with not a whole lot of talent outside of Aaron Donald, and he's really schemed up a whole lot of things to make quarterbacks kind of think just a little bit extra longer in the pocket back there while Aaron Donald does his thing. So, you know, I'm not saying like the Cowboys don't have a shot to move the ball here, but it's also not like this isn't the Cardinals where when you can't move the ball against them, that's a problem. Granted, they also had the excuse of all the injuries on the offensive line. But this is definitely maybe not so much where I need to see them like just absolutely tear up the field, but I do want to see them with some early signs of solutions to their problems that they had going into the bye, because they had this extra week to kind of go through the film. And this is the first real opportunity for Mike McCarthy since taking over play calling to look at, well, here's what's been working, here's what hasn't, here's what we haven't done enough of. And I want to see, like we talked about with Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup, like get some more deep shots going, get guys more involved. I want Luke Schoonmaker to get more involved. I want Jake Ferguson to get more involved. He's had a couple games where they targeted him a lot, and then there's other games where like you hardly even remember he's playing. And like, with the West Coast principles that they've implemented into this offense, like the tight end position, especially with Ferguson, with Schoonmaker and his ability after the catch, like those are guys that you can really rely on, get them the ball and just let them work after the catch. And they really haven't involved the tight end position that much. Like these are some areas where I want to see growth, improvement, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a 40 burger, but I want to see something that looks different from what we've seen the first 6 weeks to show that they did do some self-scouting in the bye week and they did identify some areas where they need to do a little bit better.
Okay, that's fair. Good job, Howman. That wasn't a 10-point bonus question, but still a good job nonetheless. Okay, before we go back around, I do want to say something. I've started to materialize, and I know Chris wrote about this week at the site. I've started to land on the take that the next 4 weeks are low-key critical to the season for the Cowboys. So this is, I guess, I don't know how I could define the thing that I want to see from the Cowboys, but they have to start stacking these easy wins. I know it feels like they've lost like 100 easy wins. It was really just the Cardinals game at this point in time. But their next 4 games, in case anybody's unaware, they've got the Rams on Sunday, then they're in Philadelphia. They got the Giants at home, who they blasted in week 1, and then they visit the winless Panthers. They have to take 3 of these, in my mind. Like if they're going to be challenging for the NFC East, challenging for the 1 seed, who knows? Like those things, Brandon, they have to get to. This leads us up to Thanksgiving Day. They have to get to Thanksgiving at the very least at 7-3.
Absolutely. I think it is a crucial stretch before Thanksgiving. I do think they do get 3 out of 4. I feel like they can get all 4 out of 4. I said that I think that last week. I do think even with Philadelphia being as good as they have been, Hurts has shown some things where he's not the MVP or MVP runner up from last year. That watching that Dolphins game, watching the previous few weeks, he's looked a little shaky. I've seen some mistakes on his end, which I think a Cowboys defense who was very opportunistic and in those big blowouts that the Cowboys have had earlier this year, the defense was the catalyst behind it. So I feel like Hurts is in a spot where I think he can almost be our catalyst to give a few turnovers to the Cowboys defense. So I do think the Carolina Panthers, for some reason, it's one of those games for me. I don't know why, but it's, every year there's always a game where they slip up. Obviously we saw the Cardinals, but like for some reason that they can't sleep on the Panthers. I really don't think they can sleep on the Panthers, but overall I do think they're going to get 3 out of 4 easily, I think here, but I'm pretty confident they're going to get all 4.
Tony, this isn't the most difficult 4-game stretch of the season for the Cowboys, but that's why it's so important. After this, they have 2 Thursday games, Thanksgiving against Washington and the Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. But after that, they have the Eagles at home, and then they have at Buffalo, at Miami, and Detroit on a Saturday. So they have to get there with room for error, which again is what exacerbates the issue with regards to the upcoming games. I mean, to Brandon's point, you kind of got to win all of them to buy yourself enough room for error to make up for the loss in Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, any way you cut it, the end of the season is going to be a really tough stretch here. And that's why, I mean, we're talking about have to get 3 out of 4. And I agree with that sentiment. But that makes this Rams game super important to me because I think this is a losable football game, right? Like Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. There's some guys there. Matthew Stafford can play winning football. Like Howman talking about Raheem Morris, like Aaron Donald. This is a team coming out of the bye. If they're flat, they could get beat by. And then you go into Philadelphia in a really tough situation. And now in the stretch that we're supposed to win 3 out of 4 is a real chance you can go 0-2. So I think you got to worry about this first one. You got to get this Rams one done. And then I think at that point, 3 and 4 becomes a very realistic, maybe more than likely possible situation with saying, you know what, go beat the Eagles, right? A highly beatable team, and we can get out of here 4-0, but it has to start with this week.
Howman, if the Cowboys win their next 2 games, they are in first place in the NFC East. And I mentioned this on the NFC East mixtape, which will come out tomorrow. It's possible right now the Phillies are up 2-1 in the top of the 5th inning. It's possible next Sunday's game follows a Rangers-Phillies World Series, which would just be incredible theater. Honestly, to watch. And not that, Dallas reclaiming first place in the division would have the same significance as winning the World Series, but it would go a long way, I think, in the overall vibes of discussion as we get closer and closer to the holiday season.
I mean, it honestly might mean more to the fans. I feel like there's more like passion behind the Cowboys. Everybody's high on the Rangers right now, but like Cowboys beat the Eagles. That's like a holiday in Dallas. They close all the streets and everything. But yeah, I mean, if you can beat the Rams, which I think we're all in agreement, like they're not a good team, but they're also not a team that you can overlook. So like beating them, you're not going to start hanging a banner after you beat the Rams, but it does mean something that you can go ahead and win that game, especially after the embarrassment they had against the Cardinals where they let that one slip away. If you can do that and then you can go into Philly and you can get a win, take first place in the division, like that would be huge, especially because the Giants, they're probably going to be going back to Daniel Jones, and they're not a good football team when Daniel Jones is playing. They should stick with Tyrod Taylor, but I'd be happy if they don't. And then the Panthers have been so much worse than I had anticipated that they were going to be this year. So that's the second half of that 4-game stretch is definitely more winnable. So I agree. Like if they're able to take those first 2, then barring one of those other like just fumbling the game kind of situations, that should be a really good stretch for them.
Tony, to your point about it being a losable game, I think it's easier to see this Rams game being a loss than it is any of the likely losses being a win, right? Like it's more likely that the Cowboys drop the Rams game than that they surprise the Bills or surprise the Dolphins or at this point surprise the Lions. I wrote something about how many times the Cowboys will be favored across the rest of the season. They might be favored against the Lions, maybe like a 1-2 point spread. Not that really matters, but the tough times are coming. That's why you got to lock these up. And again, that's why those losses, you don't want more Cardinals games piling up to where you're living with regret.
Yeah, I mean, you get to a point where, like you said, you're going to play some really good competition at the end of the year. And obviously, any football team can beat you. We've seen that over the last few weeks, and the Cowboys have fell victim to that themselves. But you start looking at these games and talk about highly winnable matchups. And then you get into pressure situations where going into Buffalo, I mean, Brandon knows upstate New York in the cold in December.
Central New York.
Yeah, essentially.
Well, Buffalo's in Western New York, technically.
Right. Any part of New York in December is not going to be a fun weather game. And so, like, there are elements involved. There's good teams involved. And it's just, you got to handle your business, right? Handle the Rams first. We'll talk about the next one, but it all starts this week, like I said.
All right, let's go around one more time and kind of jump off in tangents as we do. A quick update on the score. Brandon, you have 42 points. Howman, 48. Tony, you have jumped out to the lead, but you're flexing. I don't like that, Tony. I don't like taking an early victory lap. You do have a lead right now, but we'll see if that penalizes you down the road. I have no say over whether or not that ultimately does happen. Brandon, let's go back to you. What do you want to see from the Cowboys coming out of the bye? So we've talked about defense. We've talked about, juicing up the running game. We've talked about involving more pass catchers. Give us something new here, please.
Yeah, so on my list is to get the ball in the hands of CeeDee Lamb more. I know Tony said earlier to kind of spread the ball out. Howman, same thing, spread the ball out. But I'm sitting here looking at the stats here, and Dak completes 81% of his passes to CeeDee Lamb. And right now, CeeDee Lamb ranks 43rd. I know there was one less game in there because of the bye week, but he's 43rd in the league in targets, and he's the number one receiver on the Cowboys and arguably one of the best receivers in the game. That to me is a little, I think that's a little criminal. And then speaking of targets, this week's opponent features a guy named Puka Nacua. There we go. I couldn't say his name there. 82 targets. He's had 82 targets, which is almost double of what CeeDee Lamb has had so far this year, albeit one less game, whatnot. But to me, that's I think that's a very important aspect of the game. I feel like you got to get your number one receiver in the ball in his hands more. He's very dynamic. Tony alluded to that monster game he had with 7 catches over 100 yards. He's our dynamic playmaker. The run game has been 3.9 yards per carry. So that's not exactly going to light up the scoreboard. I do want to see more CeeDee Lamb touches. And that game last week where Gallup caught 3 of 10 passes. that, seven incompletions for Dak's tally out of, I think he had 9 the entire game. So the majority of his incompletions were in Michael Gallup's direction. So there's a remedy to that, and that's get the ball in the guy who you completed 81% of the time to, and that's CeeDee Lamb. Let him do his thing. I know the Rams still have a halfway decent defense. Witherspoon's a quality corner. He's got 2 picks this year. But I think this could be a monster game for CeeDee Lamb, where he just lights up that defense, and I expect bigger things from CeeDee Lamb, and I feel like Dak is going to start targeting him more. So for me, that's what I want to see coming out of the bye week.
Tony, it feels like we've been saying for years now across different alpha wide receivers for the Cowboys. Treat him like Devontae Adams. Treat him like Cooper Kupp. Just give him 12, 13, 14 targets a game. There is an argument, obviously, to spreading the love and spreading the wealth. But at the end of the day, your most dynamic playmaker is your most dynamic playmaker.
Yeah, I alluded to manufacturing touches, and I do want to see the ball get spread out just because I want to have defenses honest, right? But at the same time, I'm of the mind. I know that Dak Prescott used to tell like Des Bryant and these other guys, like, I'm going to throw the open guy. I'm not going to force feed the football, but CeeDee Lamb, deserves that, I think, in my opinion. And for, I've already mentioned it, I think twice now, for Michael Gallup to get almost double-digit targets and, to see CeeDee Lamb catch 7 of his 7 targets, like, I feel like another 3 should be the bare minimum, right? My man should get like 10 a game. So I think when you got a playmaker like that, and obviously when he's catching every single ball and he's making great plays and he's acrobatic, it's almost like a heat check in like basketball. Like, go out there and just, give him another shot. Like, he might come down with it. Like, there's something about that. So there's rare talent. And that's something I've always had a knock on Dak is like, feed your playmakers. Like, I think it's great that we want to feed Cedric Wilson. I think that's awesome, but feed your guys. You know what I mean? Those are the type of people
Wilson
that put the bread on the table. Let's go and make it.
What did Ced do to you?
Listen, I like Ced. Yeah, I miss Ced. Ced's a good player.
Wow. Ced was a really noble dude. Gave up number 11 so Micah Parsons could have it, and you're just out here dragging his name through the mud. Tony, do you feel you feel taller standing on Cedric Wilson?
I never feel taller.
Wow. Okay. Let's see here. By the way, Kevin says if CD asks for the ball one more time, Dallas may trade him for a 5th-round pick. That is really funny, and I wish that weren't so funny. Howman, do you want to see CeeDee Lamb more involved? I tweeted this and I wrote about it. CeeDee asked for the ball more against the Chargers, and he got it and he delivered. That is so cool to me. Like, for you to be able to like dial up your number and live up to it. Devontae Adams is awesome, and I don't mean to use this against him necessarily, but Devontae Adams made a proper stink about wanting the ball more, had a touchdown land in his hands in Chicago last week and completely and totally dropped it, which was just a tough scene. I mean, nobody's doubting Devontae Adams, but it's a badass thing when you can live up to it the way CeeDee Lamb did.
Yeah, it's definitely like, especially with the week prior, not only talking about wanting the ball more, but like everyone was talking about him on the sidelines and everything. And he comes in and they throw it to him. He catches every single pass. Like, that's exactly what you want to see from a guy like that. I think like the discussion about like feeding him more, you can get into kind of a tricky situation where then you're only looking his way. You're not going to use any of the other guys. And I think that's kind of what Dak Prescott's approach has always been, is like he doesn't want to just throw to a guy just because of who it is that he's throwing to. He wants to throw to someone because they're open or because they can go ahead and get the ball. And, obviously on some level you do want to feed your best player, but you don't want to just be over reliant on that. And so I think right now, like they're really in a good spot with how much they're using him. I've said I'd like to see more shots down the field with Gallup, with Brandon Cooks, Kevontae Turpin. I'm down for deep shots to CeeDee Lamb if that's part of how they feed him more. But part of the thing too is like the more you feed him, the more it's going to open things up for the other receivers too. So I don't want them to just throw to him just to get his targets to hit a certain number. Like it'll become kind of the new thing of getting your running back like 20 carries and you hit that auto win. Like getting him 10 targets every game is not just going to suddenly make the offense just really click and everything's going to be perfect. So I want him to be smart about it. I'm happy with how much he's getting the ball and he's totally doing what he's supposed to do when he gets the ball thrown to him. By the way, he's catching 81% of his passes among like qualifying receivers. like in terms of targets on the year. That's second best in the NFL among all receivers. Like he is having a great year. So should he see the ball a little bit more? Yeah, but I don't want it to just be on a stupid level where they're just throwing it to him just because.
That's really well said. Okay. Who do we want to see the Cowboys force feed that isn't CeeDee Lamb? Tony. Just one answer, one name.
Brandon Cooks.
Okay, Howman. No, I'm sorry, Brandon.
Jake Ferguson.
Okay, Howman.
Also Jake Ferguson.
I think that was the best answer. So, Tony.
Naturally.
Anyway, Howman, you were up next. What do you want to see from the Cowboys coming out of the bye?
It's another thing on offense and really just in general with Mike McCarthy is more aggression. That's something that had kind of been a thing with McCarthy where he wasn't afraid to go for it on fourth down when it was in the right spot, where it's something where, you know, the down and distance where they are in the field, the situation in the game, it made sense. And for the most part, he was willing to go for it. And generally the Cowboys under McCarthy have been very good in their fourth down go for it rate, which kind of measures how often they go for it in situations where they should go for it. And so far this year, they're 20th in total fourth down attempts. They're 22nd in optimal fourth down go rate. So basically, there's a whole lot of fourth downs where they should have gone for it, and they've either punted or they've kicked the field goal. And that level of aggression is just not there. And I don't know if it's necessarily – maybe it's some of – you know, he's so focused on play calling that he's not spending as much time thinking about should he be going forward on fourth down in this situation. Obviously, they have gone forward on fourth down a couple times. Some of them they've gotten, some of them they haven't with the tush push against the Chargers. But I just think in general, like that was such, for me, when McCarthy got hired, was such a big appeal. The fact that he was already an aggressive coach and then coming in, talking about analytics and wanting to try to win on the margins and having a good fourth down go rate is like one of the best ways to win on the margins. And I just feel like that's fallen off this year. And that's something I want to see the coaching staff kind of all encompassing, just have a more commitment to coming out of this bye.
Tony, I'm working on framing a question. So I need your thoughts on being aggressive. And if you're a fan of it, please.
Yeah, I think aggressiveness works. I mean, I think we've seen too much passive, like, and not in the, you know, throwing the ball sense. Like, it's just been very deliberate, very tempered. I do think that we have the horses in the stable and the quarterback that can get us and to be able to push the ball and be a little bit more aggressive. And I think Dak Prescott, when everybody, that whole, you know, I'm not going to throw a ton or I'm not going to throw 10 interceptions, whatever that misquote there was with Dak, was something said because he knew how Mike McCarthy was going to lay this offense out, right? It's going to be 3 steps, get the ball out, timing, and it's dink and dunk, which, you know, serves a purpose at some point, and that's kind of what the West Coast is. But you have the guys to go out and be aggressive, and I think it's going to dictate, and it's going to need to happen at some point. So with that being said, I would, you know, it has to come, and I think we saw it a little bit against Los Angeles. Like, if Michael Gallup catches the ball down the middle for the touchdown, we're talking about this in an entirely different light, right? Like, if Tony Pollard catches or Dak throws it a little bit better,
Dak sucks. Tony Catalina,
yeah. If those two hit, we're talking about an entirely different game and an entirely different offensive production. I mean, Dak's over 300 yards. He's got 3 touchdown passes, you know, plus the run. He's got 4. He's probably NFC Player of the Week. Like, there's a whole different dynamic just based on 2 different plays there.
Casey says that Mike McCarthy's aggression has been absolutely not present this year. This is the most conservative I've ever seen him coach. Again, the end of the first half against the Chargers was really embarrassing. I don't know that there's anything that needs to be said beyond that. This is what I was kind of working on. So this is our next kind of bonus round. It may be worth 10 points, maybe worth 1,000 points. I don't know. But we're going to start with you, Brandon. Mike McCarthy has one of my all-time favorite quotes, incidentally. I do think he's a really charming person. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. But he was quoted, I think, 2 years ago by saying that defense wins championships, but the Super Bowl is won by the quarterback. I love that line. That is such a cool line. And it sounded really cool when Mike McCarthy said it. There's no question that for most NFL teams, everything kind of lives and dies with the play of the quarterback, right? Like the Kansas City Chiefs, everything lives and dies with the fate of, you know, how Patrick Mahomes plays, on and on and on and on. So true or false? The fate of the Cowboys this season rests more on Mike McCarthy than it does on Dak Prescott. And I think that, you know, I've been kind of baking this take as we've been conversing here, because you have all, you know, had problems and things you want to see all ultimately kind of go back to Mike McCarthy, not necessarily Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak can only do so much, even as the team's quarterback. And so for the first time in a long time, at least I personally, my answer would be true. For the first time in a long time, I think the fate of the Cowboys rests more with the head coach or offensive play caller than it does the quarterback, maybe since prior to the Tony Romo era beginning. Brandon.
Yeah, I actually, I agree with you on that. You know me, I'm a Dak guy. I put up those 5,040 touchdown crazy numbers early this year, which that's not looking as hot right now because of the style of offense. So for me, it comes down to Mike McCarthy. I feel like we already beat the dead horse with the 8 seconds on Monday Night Football, all that. So like the conservativeness, like that whole package is a little ridiculous. I want to see him just as Tony says, they got the horses in the barn. Let those horses out of the barn and just play. Like Dak Prescott, I feel like he's a franchise quarterback. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I feel like in many ways, I don't know, I haven't seen it or heard anything about it, personally, but I feel like Dak Prescott, I feel like he's handcuffed by the way Mike McCarthy calls games sometimes, and I feel like McCarthy should just trust Dak a little bit more. Let Dak do what he does, and when he can use his legs, for example, I think that's a part of the game that I do want to see more. Obviously, cautiously because we obviously had the injury just a couple years back, but I feel like Mike McCarthy, this whole yes, he's had 12-5, which obviously is great. You guys know me. I'm the firm believer if you can't get past the divisional round with this roster, I could still be in the minority, which is fine. I think it's time to maybe start looking around. That's just my take on it. 12-5 is great, but 12-5 doesn't win you championships. You have to go deep in the playoffs, and we haven't seen that from Mike McCarthy, this version of him with the Cowboys. Obviously, we saw he was a Super Bowl winning coach with the Packers, and some people could debate it however they want with Aaron Rodgers and that whole situation, but nonetheless, he's a Super Bowl winning coach. We just haven't seen that yet, and I feel like he needs to crank it up. He needs to be more aggressive and just let Dak do Dak. And to Howman's point, also, on those fourth downs, like let's be a little more aggressive on those. I feel like he needs to be aggressive, but at the same time, he needs to also, be mindful of where those fourth downs are. So maybe be better with his situational awareness on those fourth downs. Because sometimes I've seen him go on fourth down where I'm like, what the heck are we doing here? I feel like it's just a giveaway. So yeah, Dak Prescott is the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, that he's one of the faces of the NFL, and some of it does rest on him because he is the quarterback. He is out there, but at the end of the day, you're only as good as your coach's play call sheet. And last time I checked, Mike McCarthy's the offensive coordinator, as well, so he's calling the plays. I know Schottenheimer's offensive coordinator in name, but Mike McCarthy is calling the plays. So for me, that play sheet is hamstringing Dak Prescott's ability to potentially get this team to a Super Bowl.
Tony, you helped me kind of land here, so thank you for that. Do you agree that the fate of the Cowboys is connected more to what Mike McCarthy does not do, how he does or does not limit or hinder Dak? Or do you believe that, as the quarterback, as the executor, that Dak has, the fate resting on him just simply because he is the person who carries out the code red or whatever it may wind up being?
Just to be clear, I'm not in the camp of like talking negatively about Mike McCarthy. I think he is a good coach. I think he has the ability to kind of change the narrative of what this offense is looking at. But if you want to talk about directly who can be at fault here and who has the bigger impact, I think the proof is already in the pudding that it is Mike McCarthy, right? Because by every metric, this offense is supposed to be better. They got Brandon Cooks. The wide receiver group is better. CeeDee Lamb is another year in his prime, right? Jake Ferguson, by every advanced metric, is playing better football than Dalton Schultz did last year and the year prior, right? The offensive line for the first time in 2 seasons is a complete unit. I know that's going to come
together
ever
in the Tyler Smith era.
Right.
Like
that's insane.
Yeah.
Right. So then you got Tony Pollard, and everybody who thought Ezekiel Elliott was this anchor around our neck is gone. So every step of the way, this offense is supposed to be better, including the fact that Dak Prescott was going to be better about his turnovers, which he has been, right? This offense is lent to that. So why are we better in every metric in people's minds, but the stats and the numbers don't prove it, right? So that goes back to the play caller, where everybody wanted to blame Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore did this and Kellen Moore didn't do that. It's now we're sitting in a situation where why are we better why are we thinking about it like this? But why are we actually worse? So to me, yes, ultimately Dak's gonna be the one that's gonna pull the trigger out there, and he's gonna be on the field, and he's gonna have to bear that cross, whatever the case may be. But I think we all understand, if you really look at it closely, it's Mike McCarthy's really the one that's in the crosshairs here.
Howman, you and I have, I think, defended, no disrespect to you, Tony, defended Mike more than most. Or maybe the best way to put it is we've been the most patient with him. I think people have been really quick to jump on the easy narratives. And right now they're taking their victory laps, and it's kind of hard not to fault them, especially coming off of the Monday night game and the cowardice at the end of the first half. I know we talked about that last week, but your thoughts on this true or false proposition? Remember, bonus points at stake here.
Well, I think it's funny that Tony's talking about how like the offense is worse than it was last year, but like statistically they're as good, if not better. I mean, their DVOA numbers on offense are in the same area that Kellen Moore's offense was last year. Right now they're 11th in EPA per play, which was way higher than it was last year, even when Dak Prescott was playing. So like there's a whole lot of numbers you can point to where they're not doing well. The run game has been terrible. The red zone has been troubling, but there's a whole lot of other numbers you can point to that are very positive, that are, either good or very clearly better than they were last year. So to me, it's been a mixed bag with this offense so far. Part of that is there's been a whole lot of really weird games where it's either they're blowing teams out, and so they're just kind of killing the clock, or they're playing from behind and they're just trying to play catch up. As far as the question, though, I do agree that it rests more on Mike McCarthy, mostly just because Dak Prescott is the face of this franchise. Like I don't think he's going anywhere. Everything that we've heard from Jerry and Stephen Jones, like they're sold on him. They're not going to change their mind on Dak Prescott. They're not going to come off of this season thinking like, oh, it didn't go well. That's Dak Prescott's fault, and we need to look at a different quarterback. And I don't necessarily think that they could change their mind on Mike McCarthy after this year, but it definitely rests a lot more on him because he's in charge of the offense now, in addition to being the head coach. And he came in and he kind of really changed the mindset of this team, the mentality, the way that they prepare, and the wins have followed very clearly. Two straight 12-win seasons, but now with him taking over the offense, it's really his team in the most sense that it's been since he took over. And I remember saying, like, prior to the season on one of these roundtables, one of my biggest concerns is that all of the things that he's done well for this team as the head coach may be diminished because he's now also got play calling on his plate. And I don't know if that's necessarily been the case, if that's why he's less aggressive, if that's why certain other things have kind of slipped through the cracks and, details wise. I don't know if that necessarily is the case. I can't prove that, but 6 weeks or 6 games in, and you're seeing some things both on offense where they're not getting Brandon Cooks involved down the field. They're not targeting their tight ends as much as they necessarily should be. The run game has been a disaster. And then also they're not going for it when they normally would be. The clock management there at the end of that first half is kind of suspect. And so I don't know if it's necessarily like he's saying in his mind, well, I really need to focus on the offense because I took this up on myself and I have to prove everyone that doubted me wrong. I have to prove that I made a right decision in doing this. But then the other stuff is kind of fallen by the wayside. And that's where I think the way that they respond these next couple of weeks coming out of this bye, where they've had a chance to self-scout, that's going to be huge, because if we keep seeing the same issues and, if the red zone isn't fixed, if the run game doesn't improve significantly, if the clock management stuff still is an issue, then you can really point to it and say, well, the big common denominator here was now he's calling plays. He's got a lot more on his plate, and other things have fallen by the wayside. So it's a lot easier to put this all on Mike McCarthy because he put it all on himself. And if this is the result that we get for the full year, as opposed to just a very small sample size of games, then it will be a problem, and it'll be hard to justify that.
Yeah, in many ways, Mike McCarthy is Katniss Everdeen. Volunteered, is here. It is the Hunger Games. Like, only one can win, unless PETA is involved, right? His name is PETA, I think.
PETA,
yeah, thank you very much. Tony, have you read that? I know you haven't seen anything, but have you read the Hunger Games?
No, but I've seen bits and pieces of the movie.
Were you aware that PETA was the love interest name?
I thought you were talking about the bread for a second.
Nice, Tony.
This pains me, especially after that. But the winner of this particular round was Tony, who received 10 bonus points. Howman, I think your point was strong, but I think that Tony got there a little bit, a little bit more succinctly, and with a little bit more like negativity, which is what I was aiming for here. Like I really wanted somebody to kind of go at somebody. You were really calm and reasonable, and so we needed some aggression here for this particular answer. But final standings going into the final portion here. Brandon, Howman tied at 69 points apiece. Tony, your bonus took you to 75. Tony, take us home. What do you want to see from the Cowboys coming out of the bye? Last one here.
Yeah, I had some really specific things that I've written down, but I want to end it with this, and it's kind of more open-ended and a little bit more wide open, and I can sum it up in one word. I just want consistency. Like, I just want more consistency. We talked about the ebbs and the flows. The first real game it felt like of this season was last Monday, right? When we played the Chargers, there was a real fight. It was a real game. We didn't get our doors blown down by the 49ers. We didn't crush everybody else. Like, it just felt like for the first time we had seen like what this team can look like in a road environment, which, call that, we'll do an asterisk with the Chargers being a road environment, but a primetime setting with a quarterback that many view to be a top tier quarterback. And they overcame, right? But I want to see that more, right? I don't want to have a letdown against the Rams this week where, you come in here and you're dejected because you don't know what to make of this team, right? We're 4-2 with 2 losses that have you really scratching your head. Now, especially with the 49ers and the way they played the last 2 weeks, I don't think that anybody's going to sit here and say we're that bad, right? The Cowboys are as bad as they played against the 49ers, and that's who they are. But that's what's on your resume. I just need to see more consistency offensively. I need to see this defense to step up and be more consistent. And I don't say that to say like they're playing bad, but they have some scars of themselves on their own, right? So there's some things that this whole team got to work through. There's plenty of time to figure it out. We had talked about it a couple segments ago that this 4-game stretch is super important. They got to find their level here. Water got to find its level. And if this team is what we think they are, I mean, all week we spent people talking about Detroit's better, and the Cowboys are now the 4th or the 5th best team in the NFC, and they can't be trusted. And everybody feels, they're giving Jalen Hurts a pass, and they're giving Brock Purdy a pass, and all these guys. But none of it really matters, right? Just go find the consistency, go play good football, and at the end of the year, we'll see how it shakes out.
Yeah, Brandon, kind of Tony's point, and we haven't really talked about this, but I think every Cowboys fan respects Micah Parsons asking for a spade to be called a spade. But Micah, whether he's doing it purposefully or not, is narrowing the target on the Cowboys' back for the moment that they do slip. I mean, the moment the Cowboys have a slip up, everything that Micah Parsons has said, which again is fair and objectively based, is going to lead to, the teardown of all teardowns. And to Tony's point, if it happens against the Rams, I mean, he's setting, I don't want to say that Micah's setting them up, but they're set up to just kind of be public scrutiny. You know what I mean? Like they are set up to kind of be the face of dysfunction. And no one will care that the Niners lost to the Vikings or the Browns with PJ Walker or the Eagles, lost to the Jets. It will just be all about the Cowboys, and that's the way it will be, but it will be frustrating for all of us, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Micah does make really good points, but sometimes I feel like he does insert his foot into his mouth, by saying some things. And, I respect his candor. I respect him doing the show he does it every Monday. So I do respect that he's out there doing these type of things. I mean, everybody's got a podcast these days. That's just kind of the way of the world. But yeah, I mean, to Tony's point, on my list here, I wrote consistency, not once but 3 times, because my thought was they've blown out 3 teams, but they've laid 2 eggs. That was one of my points. But my most important takeaway for this, coming up for this bye week, is they got to shore up the mental mistakes. That is really where it comes down to, right? Coming into the bye week through 6 weeks of the season, the Cowboys led the league in penalties when they tallied 46 flags for 357 yards. That is not championship winning football. These mental mistakes need to be shored up, and the bye week is a perfect time to reset, get yourself refocused, and clean up some of those mental errors. I know they're going to get penalized. Every team gets penalized. But if they can minimize that,
the Eagles literally did not get penalized on Sunday Night Football. Just to be very clear, Brandon.
Well, yeah, they had a ref that was like 60 miles away, or from the area. Or whatnot. Yeah,
but just saying, like it's possible apparently for one team to be penalized 10 times and for you to be penalized none. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, most teams throughout the season they're gonna get penalized, and the Cowboys have been the best at it, which is not really that's not really the best. You don't want to be the best at doing something when it comes to, setting your team back behind the 8 ball a little bit. So for me, when it comes to the end of the day, we have to be, we have to clean this up in the postseason. So we're going to get to the postseason. I'm pretty confident in that. But if you want to get past that proverbial divisional round, you have to clean these things up. We have a lot of season left. We have a lot of regular season, and then we have postseason, after that. So they have to clean up these penalties. And coming out of a bye week, let's hope they clean these things up, and we don't have a situation where these penalties come back to bite us in the rear end, and the Rams somehow sneak out with a win on Sunday.
Howman, do you agree that consistency is kind of the ultimate end-all be-all for who the Cowboys are right now and who they've been for a very long time?
Yeah, it would be really nice to see some consistency. That would definitely be welcome. As we were talking about, like, Micah Parsons and all the things that he's saying, and, like, I completely agree with everything that he says, and he makes really good points. But also, probably the thing I really want to see coming out of the bye is, like, just be quiet, like, move in silence, just, like, show up and do your work. Like even with the 49ers game, there was so much talk, and I'm not talking about just Micah Parsons now, by the way. I like all the different players who like to talk and, like, hype up the different games. I just feel like there's certain games that they really get up for, like, and we thought that the 49ers game was going to be one of those, but, like, they really get up for some games, especially divisional rival games. But then they'll face, like, the Cardinals or the Broncos a couple years ago, and it's like they're not really excited about it. Like, I want the team that just shows up and they're like, yeah, this, like, Sunday is work. Like, we're here to just dominate you. We're going to go out there and we're just going to do our job. I don't want them to necessarily have to go to the media and, like, hype themselves up by hyping everyone else up. And that kind of falls in line with the consistency. And you don't necessarily need to avoid the media at all costs in order to be consistent, but just have that same kind of mindset. And that's kind of a similar mindset that Mike McCarthy has. He's not really one to like make big, bold proclamations, and, like, probably his spiciest comment that he's had since coming to Dallas was the, we're nobody's underdog thing. He's not really, compared to, like, a Nick Sirianni, he's not going to, go viral for his interview comments. And I want the team to just kind of show up and say, like, yeah, we're here to beat the Rams. That's all we're really focused on. And if you can have that kind of approach, that gets you a certain level of consistency if you do it every single week. And with some of the opponents, like we talked about earlier, like, that they have later in the season, the Bills, the Dolphins, the Lions, like, you're going to need to be able to be consistent, because even though you may not win all of those, you can, if you take a loss and it's bad, like, you still have that same consistent approach of, all right, well, that was bad, but also it's one game, like, we get right back on it and we're going to go back to work, and we got these other teams to beat. We can't get too down on ourselves. So it would really be nice to see that. I don't know if, like, that huge of, like, a mentality shift can happen in the bye week, but if they come out and they're just, like, laser focused and they play consistent, they don't have as many of the mental mistakes, that would be a very welcome change.
Mike McCarthy's "we're nobody's underdog" line famously said the week leading up to them playing the Los Angeles Rams, which is who they're playing this week. So nice little full circle moment there for you, Howman. In fact, I'm going to give you 1 extra point for that. So well done on the poetry there. The final points are in. They are all tallied. And Howman, even though you picked up that last point at the very end, it was not enough. Brandon, 74. Howman broke the tie, sent you straight down to bronze. Tony Catalina, he called his shot, boys. Look at him. He came in. He was last, not his typical starting position. Doesn't matter. Tony, yeah, you had the Red Sox, but the real thing that you win in life has nothing to do with your professional sports teams and your fandom. It's the Blog on the Boys Roundtables. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. And I'm very glad I won, because I did not want to be disrespectful towards the Astros. So I appreciate the win.
Wow. What the hell, Tony?
I had it. See, you know what?
Nah.
It was like, it's
cool.
like the Kanye West thing.
Nah.
I guess we'll never know.
Nah. I'm sorry, Tony. This was too much. You played with fate, and I'm sorry. You flew way too close to the sun. There have been some last-second points tabulated. And Brandon and Howman are tonight's roundtable winners. Congratulations to the two of you. Very well earned. Brandon, what do you have to say? This totally fair process.
It was a tremendous process. It was very democratic. It was well done. RJ, you did a hell of a job by putting this together. I'm sorry about your Astros. It's a very tough go. I can't say much because my Red Sox, they weren't even in the conversation this year. So I'm just sitting back watching baseball as a casual fan at this point. So, I've been there before, so I do feel bad.
You said the A word. You got to get rid of a point now.
Wow. Look, I'm all up in my feels. You know what? I'm just gonna stick to what's what. I hate to be yanking emotions around. Tony, you can have this thing. All right.
What a roller coaster of an emotion, man. Jeez.
This is just,
Cowboys
hey,
football season.
whatever. Howman, do you have anything to say? You won or you lost, but then you won, then you lost again, all before you even spoke.
Yeah, I'm still counting this as a win. I'm gonna enjoy it. I'm over here like I was like trying to change my background real quick before you changed your mind.
Yeah, I was honestly thinking about that. That was a tough scene.
Then I should have won that because I got all the love. I didn't give any bad voodoo to the Astros, so I guess by that proxy, I probably should have won, right?
Tony, Lonely Catman says it was worth it to lose it last minute and stick it to RJ. Would you have felt that way if I hadn't given it back to you?
I think that was my sentiment. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Everyone won. Really. Everyone won tonight, except for Mike McCarthy. This was a tough episode for Mike McCarthy. So hopefully Mike has something in store on Sunday that makes us all feel better. So I guess let's leave. Tony, I would like you, even though you won, as we depart, to sing us the song that Katniss sang to Rue in the Hunger Games, please.
I never saw the movie, man.
Let's go ahead. What do you think the song was? Let's just sing what you think it was.
I don't even think I have the wildest imagination to
come on, Tony. Come on, let's do it.
The words you said to me don't even sound like the English language. Her name is Catnip, and like pita bread. Like I don't even know who these people are.
Katniss Everdeen sang it to Rue. What do you think the song sound like? Just come on, Tony. Just do it.
Rue, so she's making something.
Okay, what do you think the song sounded like? Give us something. Come on.
No, I mean, what is it? There's probably some trumpets, right? You guys like the medieval stuff, right? There's probably something going on. I have no. Let Howman sing, and he knows the words. Sing along
this
if
is
you know
your thing,
the words.
Tony. Just give us a little melody at the very least, Tony. Come on.
But I can't even conceptualize what you would want me to make.
You can do this, Tony. Come on, you can do it.
Come on, Tony.
Give us a melody. You don't have to sing it, but just hum it. Come on.